So shifting gears, we're going to talk a little bit about neurodiversity here today, because I think with regards to both of these, subjects, we're seeing an influx of folks, that these topics relate to. So neurodiversity. Chetha, do you mind reading this out loud?
Neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways. There is no one right way of thinking, learning, and behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits.
Absolutely. So types of neurodivergence here. Angie, do you mind? Or actually, Adriana, do you mind reading these?
Attention to cognitive deficiency, hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, ASD, traumatic brain injury, TBI, Tourette's syndrome, mood disorders, and dyslexia.
Sure. So what I want us to kind of think about, right, is like what thoughts come to mind when you think of neurodiversity, given these sort of different, potentially diagnoses, right, or just in general this notion of a movement to support a sort of inclusion of differences of the mind, right, and differences of neurological differences, right? So what things come to mind?
Meeting them where they're at, because as someone who, I don't believe I have any neurodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
although my wife would argue that. But that being said, I just try to understand. I don't know. I try to all right, where's this person? Let's just work from there, because I don't want to insult their intelligence, but I also don't want to assume that they know more than they do, and I don't want to assume that they know less than they do.
Yeah.
So I just try to sort of not let them lead it, but let them inform me in the best way I can help them.
Absolutely.
And then just kind of work from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's sort of the meeting the student where they're at, right? And that's something we generally say about working with any student, right?
Yeah.
And the important thing about what we're going to talk about here right now, and what Monty's saying, is all of what we discuss with regards to supporting neurodiversity is to support everyone, not just folks that are identifying with any of these sort of diagnoses that came from the previous slide, right? But it is to generalize, though, is to do a disservice too as well. So we want to sort of take into account that there might be needs that these students have that divert from maybe a neurotypical student's needs, right? So it's important to emphasize this as well. So in that same vein, right, some of the challenges that neurodivergent students may encounter, right? Sean, do you mind reading these?
Stress/anxiety.
Right, and this is potentially with social situations, particularly with students that come from K through 12 systems where the schooling is not as inclusive. Potentially this could be a totally different sort of cultural shock. So we want to keep that in mind. Continue, Sean.
Communication issues.
Yep.
Sensory sensitivity. Executive functioning issues. Impulse or emotional control. Organization, time management. Focus, attention, cognitive delays, speaking, listening, and reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And executive functioning, being this, impulse control, emotional control, there might be tantrums, potentially that a neurodivergent student can experience, right? And it's to think about what we can do in that moment is very important, right? And a lot of times it's just trying to de-escalate and trying to understand, like Monty's saying, how can I help you in this moment? Even if it's something emotional in that moment because of the frustration of a writing assignment, right? Potentially it's overwhelming, the amount of sort of abstract thinking that's involved with the particular concept that they're grappling in their writing, right? It might lead to that, right? So how do we support that, right? How do we support somebody that experiences some cognitive delays, some delays with speaking, listening, or even reading, right? So what should tutors do? And tutors and student assistants. I was imagining the student assistants being involved too, but they're holding it down at the front. So thank you for them for holding it down at the front. General best practices. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep it rolling, right? Do not diagnose. Do not diagnose. Once again, the strategies we're going to talk about here today and the approaches we're going to talk about here today, apply it to anybody that it could be helpful towards, right? Do not ask if they have a disability. That is that's protected information. That is private information, and we do not want to be outing anybody either, or forcing somebody to out themselves, right? Do not give answers or take over the writing assignment. This is super important. Even if the writing should be always theirs, right? Even no matter how imperfect it is, no matter how much you're panicking about their grades and stuff, we need to have that sort of separation, right? That the success in that moment, it means something else other than a letter grade. It means that person having a chance to engage in a challenging learning activity for their own development, beyond the grade in that moment. So their writing should be a reflection of their current skills. Fight the urge to edit their errors. So it's very easy in the moment to be like, actually, you should put a comma there. Actually, you should put this word there. Actually, you should rephrase that there. No, let them sort of express themselves on the page as much as possible. Debrief interactions after tutoring sessions with Alex and Anna. So if there's anything that's confusing, because it is a typical sort of experience that you've had during the session, let's talk about it. And as a team, we can come together and we can figure out how to best support the student. Potentially they're working with other peers too. And we can look at their appointment history and get connected with those other tutors too. But we need that communication though to be able to support these students, right? And then apply following approaches to all students who may benefit from them. Once again, let's universalize this. This is the notion of universal design. By focusing on and supporting, some of the folks that are maybe the most marginalized, we're able to help everyone, right? Because then you never know when these things can be applicable to even to you, right? And then above all else, if you're asking me, Alex, am I being a successful tutor when you're working with someone that is neurodivergent? I'm going to ask you, were you patient? Were you kind? Were you open-minded? If you can answer all of those three with yes during the session, then I say that was a successful session. Once again, beyond whatever gets done during the session, whether it just be one sentence or it be a whole essay, right? As long as you cover those three things, that's a success in my book. So let's talk about the neurodiversity training handout that we've created here. It is right in front of y'all, but it's also located on the CAS Writing Tutors Canvas course shell as pictured in this slide, the purple one. And you can find that under the Tutor Training Handbook and Presentations and more. So let's take some time to read and discuss neurodiversity training, the training handout here. So if we could we popcorn around the room? And I'll start us off with the introduction, but afterward I'll kind of bounce around with the bullet points, okay? So remember that what may come easily or be automatic to some may challenge neurodivergent students. So be mindful of ways to make certain fundamental study habits or fundamental concepts comprehensible. Meaning that you might need to take some time to talk about what does creating an agenda look like, right? Because you're balancing so many different assignments, so many different classes, so many different readings, right? And how to study for something, right? Sometimes students aren't told, how to particularly study for an assignment or a test, right? And these are interventions that we can have during the tutoring sessions that can really build up a student to be successful. Above all else, once again, be kind, open-minded, and patient. So starting off here with Chenpin. Chenpin, do you mind reading the first bullet points?
Respect their particular demeanor or disposition. Adjust your demeanor to suit their energy. Example, use a gentler tone of voice if the student seems timid or anxious. Do not take a lack of eye contact or other atypical gestures as disrespectful.
Absolutely. All right, Daniel.
Politely and directly address social expectations. Be clear about what one can and cannot do during certain social situations. For example, a student sneezes on you, you can politely let them know that one should sneeze away from others.
That happened to me, by the way.
For example, a student is speaking very loudly. Politely let them know that speaking at a lower volume is more appropriate for this library setting. Example, a student is hitting themselves out of frustration. Direct them to stop by giving an instruction like hands on the table while demonstrating.
So before we move on, for that one particularly, that has happened here too. And the recommendation from a special educator that I spoke to about that used to work on campus in Laura Kettle, I think some of us have met her. She's wonderful. She's now working at USC. We're very lucky to have her. Was to be direct, give a direct command in that moment of hands on the table and like demonstrate. Because then that sort of directness will throw them out of the sort of loop that they are in on a cognitive level. So if it gets to that point where somebody is so frustrated that they do this, that's something that you can do. Yeah. Moving on to the next one, Mark.
Use visual concepts / word maps to demonstrate logical connections between ideas. Using whiteboards and markers to draw visual connections between concepts may help some students organize their ideas. Note, see concept maps, UNC Learning Center resource below for more info.
The handout, the digital handout has that link as well, so you can see examples of how to create bubble maps and stuff. And do that. Monty?
Ask how, what questions more than why questions. Example, how can you explain blank to your audience? How does this connect to your topic?
Absolutely. Sean, can you read the one before that, the let the student make mistakes?
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Let the student make mistakes, refrain from immediately correcting them, observe their process and provide guidance accordingly upon reviewing phase.
Absolutely. No. So both of those wonderful points right there. Yeah, and with one that Monty read specifically, right? How, what questions instead of more why questions, right? How can you explain this, right? Rather than being like, why did you write this, right? Because even the tone there, right? We want to make sure that we are avoiding sounding sort of judgmental, even in that, right? About some of these thought processes. Okay. And then Jaden, could you keep us going and provide guidance?
Provide guidance for independent commitment. Work with the student to make lists or outlines of what they can do independently.
Wonderful. Adriana?
Establish routines for the tutoring sessions and beyond. Example, start off with a familiar greeting followed by a routine set of questions.
Support students in their reframing of failure into part of the learning process. Help foster a positive outlook.
Potentially for some of these students, this is the very first time they've ever failed at anything before. And that is the way that K through 12 is uniquely structured to guarantee success for students. They cannot fail students that are in special education. The student will continue to repeat courses until they pass. That's the way that they're structured. That is not the same here. Because once a student with autism, as for example, reaches the university level, there's a limit. They have the same limit that you all have as the general population of students, where you can only repeat a course so many times, right? But they don't know that too, where you can repeat a course and it replaces the grade. So that's something important to emphasize, is that it's okay to repeat the course if you have to do, right? Jennifer?
Provide concrete examples for abstract or complex topics. Clearly state suggestions. Avoid abstraction or room for interpretation, which can confuse and cause anxiety.
For sure. This goes for humor too. Sometimes our sarcasm doesn't read well, or it just completely goes over folks' heads. So just as best as possible, in your communication, watch out for abstractions or those complex topics. Daniel?
Check for understanding often. Ask them to review learning periodically to assess their understanding. Formative assessment, adjust as needed. Ask for them to define terms that they're reading in prompts or pulling from readings. Ask for them to explain their approach.
Help students to break down multi-level assignments into more comprehensible steps and help them set up mini goals for tackling the individual parts. Suggestion, put one problem/question of the larger assignment on a single blank page so that the myriad items on the page do not overwhelm the student.
Get to know the student's personality. Identify neurodivergent students' strengths and work towards them. Examples, tech savviness, creativity. Use interests to engage them in the learning process. Example, a student is really into Disney movies. Use a theme from one of their favorite movies to make a literary analysis assignment comprehensible.
Take breaks as necessary. Good day.
Take breaks as necessary. If the student is frustrated, having a tough time focusing, you can ask them if they would like to take a quick walk to get water, to just gather their thoughts, or to attend any of the needs. If you need a break, let the student know that you need to step away for a few minutes, take a walk, take deep breaths, gather your thoughts, and return to the session.
So the human needs are important as well, right? So feel free to do this during session, especially if they have an hour-long session. You can take some of that time to just addressing those needs. Jaden?
Use guided color reading strips or other materials to aid in focusing on texts. Assist students in assigning priority to assignments. Support students' self-advocacy. Help prepare them to talk to professors, counselors, classmates, or any other source of support.
I'm going to finish this up here.
Ask them about what successful learning/work/coping strategies they have used in the past, such as high school or in other courses, and try to incorporate them. Also ask what didn't work in high school or the past.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left. I do want to give you all about 15 minutes of downtime while you're transitioning back. But really quickly, turn to the person to your next to you. I'll say next to you. Right, so two, right? And so you're group 1, group 2, group 3 is with Sean and Sean, and group 4 over here. right? I want you to read through the scenario, and I want you to, using the concepts from the handout, address your scenario. All right, folks?
You can draft something so we work on the next session on that.
Cool. So what we'll do right now is we'll go around the room. I will read out the scenario real quick, and then just chime in with maybe 2 or 3 takeaways that you have for the scenario based on the discussion, right? So with group 1, the writer comes to you in the middle of the semester with a long prompt from one of their assignments for the semester. The prompt has multiple levels of questions and directions to follow. You don't follow this subject, you don't know this subject/concept, but you have worked on this assignment, assignments similar in scope and directions for other classes. The writer feels overwhelmed by the assignment. What are some ways to support this writer? So, group number 1.
Yeah, like to kind of break it down, they say that the prompt has multiple levels of questions and directions, so you just take it through with the student, question by question, direction by direction. You break it up into, bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, so we said one question at a time, probably one question on one page as the handout suggested, and then kind of reassuring them we don't have to get through all the questions today. We still have a lot of time.
Absolutely. And what I'll add is you can let them know next time we come in, we'll work on the next part, right? Or at home, work on this part, right? Guiding the independent sort of practice, right? And also returning to it when you come back in. And through that, you build rapport with them and they'll start to trust you too. So it helps them. All right, scenario number 2, thank you so much. The writer shows up to the session giving off very nervous vibes. They rock back and forth in their chair and occasionally stare at the wall across the room while mumbling to themselves. After a little while, you discover that the writer is really worried about their grades. They begin to bring up the grade scale and how many points they need to get an A in the class. They ask you about what happens if they fail the assignment and fail a class. What are some ways to support this writer?
Right, so I think this kind of goes into the support students and the reframing of failure. So you would explain to them that it's okay to fail in college, that one might fail a lot, but they can retake courses or find substitute courses that apply, and that by kind of retaking a course, you don't lose all your progress on that knowledge, so you'll start knowing already and having experience with that topic.
Very well said, Monty.
And then since they mentioned the thing about points and stuff like that, I'd maybe make office hours with the professor, discuss potential extra credit assignments, and then ask them how might we improve upon this, their understanding, to better understand why they're failing and where they need to improve upon, and how can we support that.
Absolutely. And when you're referring them out to their professors, right, you can spend some time during the tutor session helping them to phrase their questions to ask during the So you're helping them to structure those rapport building with the professors, right, those sessions, right? Next up, you have worked with this writer a few times. Wonderful work, by the way. You've worked with this writer a few times before on the same assignment. During the session, you recognize that the writer does not make progress on the assignment outside of the tutoring sessions. It is getting busier at the writing wing, so they may not be able to meet with you before the assignment is due in a few days. What are some ways to support this writer? Sean and Jaden.
So we were kind of looking at maybe if it's an assignment that maybe they'll, I guess they won't always be up front, but if they are, you probably, and they say this is a ongoing assignment that's going to be something referred to throughout the semester, you could kind of referring to provide guidance for independent learning, probably help them make a reference guide or lists, outlines, and maybe break up the assignment in chunks and kind of we can work on this section during the session, and then we can maybe make flashcards or some sort of study guide. You can work on this one on your own time, and then return to the next session. We can look at it together if you still need help, and that sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to add, Jaden?
In that similar vein, also assist the student assigning them to their assignments alone.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And we also discuss how the students self-advocacy.
Yeah.
So that way, if the student choose outside the student session, probably contact the professor or do another way to.
I've worked with a student the entire session, the hour-long session, on a extra credit assignment when they had a project that they needed to complete. it happens, right? And then at that point, just apologize to them. If you figure it out towards the end, you're like, oh shoot, you know what I mean? But that's where it's important, and so heed by warning, always, ask them, do they have other things going on, right? Any other writing assignments, right? Kind of get a sense, and then because that's when you can provide that guidance of making sure prioritize this over this, right? Yeah. And then the last group here, the scenario for them before. The writer comes into the session not having read the material to answer the reading response questions, so they are brought into work with you. They begin reading the textbook chapter out loud during the session at a very high speaking volume that distracts other tutoring sessions in progress. Also, they are reading, as they are reading, they demonstrate difficulty with reading, such as losing their place and comprehension issues. And mention that reading feels daunting because of its length. The reading feels daunting because it's like, what are some ways to support this writer?
So we kind of just talked about, obviously, like, we know that individual, voice just kind of have that, like, continue on that library setting. And then also we talked about using reading, guided colored reading strips so that they can focus easily on the text.
Yeah.
And then also just kind of taking, like, breaks and kind of, like, after every few sentences and kind of, like, explaining like a term or just summarizing something that stood out to them.
Fantastic.
Just don't try to overcorrect them for sure. That could bring their confidence down. And also, I don't see an issue also with like going back and forth if it's like a heavy text or it's large. Just okay, you can read this section out of that and kind of bounce off.
There's some kind of sharing a little bit right there. That's if you're comfortable doing that, absolutely. The volume thing though, we do want to emphasize, right? It is totally okay to provide that suggestion. Hey, just a heads up, there's other people trying to focus, right? So we want to bring it down just a little. But I really like your enthusiasm. Always kind of like adding that little bit of positivity to it, right? But yeah, thank you all so much. I'm sorry for taking more of your time, in that regard, but the rest of the time is yours, Feel free to transition back to the writing. Hopefully this was helpful. We can continue this conversation. Feel free to come to my office. Once again, if anything comes up, right, that's atypical and you need some extra support, guidance, I'm all ears. Anna's here too. Well, not here right now, but we'll be here, So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
I've had this student a few times.
Sure.
I haven't had them recently, but just in case, it's like the one that I read, like they usually don't read ahead of time, or they don't watch the video.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that they, like last time they read like a certain section of it, and I trusted them. I was like, okay, yeah. But then when they were saying things, I don't know the subject, but I knew that it was not correct.
I see.
And then that's when I asked them to go back to the thing. And like, okay, you want to read this for a moment? But it seems like when they would read, it wouldn't be the right information. I don't think they were processing it right. So then I don't know if I should take the time to read it all with them. How do I address that?
I think right there, help them to take down notes from the reading. Right, in that, because them noting down, right, the facts, what is on the page there, what are the details, and you can help to point some of those out, will help them to sort of their mind to key in on what to take away from there. So it's almost guiding. Yeah, correct. Yeah, if there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept, because they're not even going to get to the assignment if they can't, with that first part, right? So this is where we sort of help to guide the thinking, right? Yeah, and with that, there might be some ways that we can demonstrate reading strategies, right? If the textbook is laid out with key terms on the side, you can point that out to them. That's important information. That's where your mind should kind of go to, right? So there's a little bit of that, right, where you can help with that, with regards to reading. But I get it, Angie, and of course, at the end of the day, right, as much as they can sort of retain is going to be helpful because maybe they do have to repeat the class, right? But at least they'll know a little bit more about that subject.
Okay, thank you.
Because of the time that they spent with you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Wonderful.